Like a robot programmed to do one thing, suddenly asked to do a different thing, Donald Trump is short-circuiting before our very eyes. His inability to pivot or adjust to running against Vice President Kamala Harris and the Harris era of the 2024 presidential campaign is obvious every time he opens his mouth or takes to his social media platforms. And just so you're aware, he will be opening his mouth again this afternoon at any minute, actually at a different house this time, Bedminster, New Jersey. They are calling it a press conference, his second in as many weeks, and if today's event is anything like last or his so-called economic messaging event yesterday, then you can understand why we're choosing not to broadcast it here in real time. We will, of course, monitor it and pass along anything news-related and true, because inevitably Donald Trump's public appearances have been less about the issues and the news lately, as if they ever were, and more about threats and lies and demeaning people. And, his current advisors are pleading with him to stay on message, whatever that means. So what did Trump do today? He hired some of the Wayback crew. That includes, among others, former advisor Corey Lewandowski, the man who coined the phrase, "Let Trump be Trump." Joining our conversation, President and CEO of Voto Latino, MSNBC contributor Maria Teresa Kumar, plus political strategist and MSNBC senior analyst Matt Dowd is back. Matt Dowd, I wanted to pick up on the conversation we started this week about the way the race has been reshaped. There is so much evidence that that is the case, and it doesn't matter who the sort of pollster or the data is being collected for, right? Whether it's a poll that typically focuses on swing states or Democratic states or a certain demographic or women or young people or Gen X or Gen Y or Gen Z or whatever it is, they all show the same direction, right? That Vice President Harris has reset the race and that Donald Trump is now today, and we should say 83 days is an eternity, but today the race has been reshaped and Vice President Harris has some momentum and enthusiasm. What are you watching now, Matt? I mean, what are the things that are legitimate political news over the next 83 days?
That's a very good question. So I'll add one thing that I actually think the starting of the resetting of the race was Joe Biden's decision, which then put the vice president in the decision to take advantage of that decision, which completely reset the vibe. And it was an earthquake in our political system. And I don't think Donald Trump and his folks know how to deal with that earthquake in our political system. To me, we're at a point, the timing of this, I mean, it's almost as if it's a perfect storm on behalf of Vice President Harris against Donald Trump in everything that's happened. And then we're about to go into this convention period, which the vice president will come out of with my expectation is a pretty solid 4 or 5 point lead when she leaves that convention, which is significant in an environment where races are decided by 5 or 6 points. That is a significant movement in this. To me, it's not going to be about advertising, even though there's going to be a ton of advertising. And it's not going to be really about 22 visits to a given state, though those are important. To me, this race, in order for Donald Trump to get back in this race and to reset the psychic nature of this race to his advantage, it has to be a big, huge moment. And either it's external, which we're unaware of, so we can't predict those. And the only ones that we can predict that could reset the race possibly are the debates. That's what's left, I think, to really fundamentally shift the race to a disadvantage of Vice President Harris. And one thing I think people have forgotten, and we talked about this a little bit, but I want to recall this, is that Donald Trump's staying power of popularity and significance with the public, his life it's always shown it wanes. And I'll give you the perfect example, The Apprentice. The Apprentice in year one had 20 million people that viewed it. It was new, it was funny, it was entertaining. Donald Trump had his shtick. By year 4 of The Apprentice, it was down to 10 million viewers. By year 7 or 8, The Apprentice shtick had worn off and it was less than 5 million people were watching The Apprentice and Donald Trump. That's the situation he is in because he is old shtick and everything he seems to say and do is 2016, 2020, it's all old. And what Vice President Harris is an opening brand new series, which none of us have ever seen before, and are watching it unfold in real time while we have this old shtick, a rerun on Nickelodeon that's still ongoing, that still says the same thing. And that's why, to me, the last elements of really fundamentally shifting this race are the debates.
Maria Teresa Kumar, you know data, you know politics, and you know the country. And I think it's what Matt said, plus it's the collective PTSD. It's we live in a country where to save women from the fate, the likes of which Amanda Zarowski endured, where she almost died because she was pregnant with a non-viable pregnancy. She has become a person in the political arena talking about the consequences of what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump picked people who would overturn Roe versus Wade. The country has been through something traumatic. He was unrepentant about his failures around COVID. I mean, I'm not sure that he couldn't have done himself some political good by pretending to care that millions of people died. It was both his failures and his indifference to the suffering and the tragedy and the collective loss and the grief that people are still processing. So I think it's more than being tired and old and no one's watching anymore. I think she's speaking to not just exhaustion, but to our desire to pick ourselves up from all of these blows and sort of make a turn towards something more positive and more hopeful.
Nicole, I think that that's exactly what the American people are thinking about right now, because it wasn't just COVID, it was pre-COVID. There was not a moment when any of us would wake up in the morning and said, oh my gosh, what did he tweet now? There wasn't a moment where if you were an African American, you felt like the police was watching you and that you didn't have someone to actually have your back. There wasn't a moment being a Latino under Trump where you did not fear that when you get home, you were going to be racially profiled, or if you were undocumented, that your loved one may not be there. There wasn't a moment where we all didn't feel tense and we weren't sure if our neighbor had our back. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do with Tim Walz is beautifully remind us that we are a joyful people, that we are a loving people, that we do care about each other, and that we do want to close a chapter on a dark period. Because what Donald Trump reminded us is that there's still deep racism and division in this country, but they are the last gasp. The fact that we have the evangelical community coming out, that we have actors, the white dudes for Kamala Harris, we have every spectrum and different groups of people saying this is who we actually are. We are a multicultural America that when we come together with very clear-eyed of what our difficulties are, but with a plan to move us forward, we are unstoppable. One of the things that President Biden has always says at the end of the day is that we are America, damn it. We can do whatever we set our minds to. And he's reminding us with the choice of Kamala Harris with Tim Walz that is actually true. This is not AI-generated crowds that you see. You see real enthusiasm. And I have to share with you, in the work that we're doing, in the last 10 days, we've seen a surge in young voters saying, we want to re-register, we want to get back in the game, we want to drive the agenda. And if you want to look at the polling does not include newly registered voters. And it doesn't necessarily always highlight the independents that are moving. And so even in Ohio, where they're saying that she's down, I would actually encourage us to think that she might be up because of the young voters. In Arizona alone, Biden won that state by 10,700 votes. My organization so far, we've already registered over 13,000 of that are newly registered voters, right? So we're exceeding those margins already. And we don't expect this type of movement until post Labor Day, post the DNC conventions, the RNC conventions. So the momentum is absolutely there. And the only thing that I would alert the public to is that there is an effort on the other side to continue cheating. And by cheating, what I mean is that they are actively purging folks on the voter file. So if there's any public service announcement that I encourage folks to do is make sure that even though you voted last time, make sure that you're still valid on that voter file, because there's plenty of time to register.